Hello, I'm Charlotte Leisman. Welcome back to the Gothic Literary Society, and welcome to Horror Dark Fantasy Friday. Today we are talking about the first book in the trilogy by Jay Kristoff, Nevernight. So this book is interesting just on the surface because there is a strong debate about whether it is young adult fiction or adult fiction. And the debate centers around some of the intensity in the book and some of the scenes. So most people focus in on the fact that there are several very adult scenes in this book and call it more of an adult book rather than young adults. I would agree with that, but I would also say that in addition to that, even more than the adult scenes, it's actually quite an intense story. There is a lot of blood sorcery. It's a very dark story. It's the kind of story I wouldn't recommend for a child, and yet it has some very interesting elements to it that I actually enjoyed. And lastly, I'm not really a lover of young adult fiction, and I enjoyed this one. So if you do read young adult fiction and you like things that are a little darker, or you're not sure you like young adult fiction, but you like darker adult fiction, in either case you might still like this one. So we're going to try to avoid any plot spoilers as we go throughout the story. So if you haven't read it and you think you might want to read it, feel free to stay with us and I will try to keep it safe. So on the surface, this is definitely fantasy for sure. It's set in a world, Itria, and specifically the city of God's Grave in Itria and some of the outer regions as well. We'll get into that in a minute. And this is a world that is ruled over by 3 suns. So it is almost never fully dark, hence the title, Nevernight. The writer sets it up as being a negative thing. So the lack of night, the lack of a relief from the scorching sun is something that is a detriment for the characters. The ruling party in this world is the Illuminati, and they are something like the Roman leaders, the Roman Senate. So this book is something of a fantasy version of the Roman Empire. It's definitely extraordinarily unique, the world building itself, and the main character's name is Mia. So she came from a family that was in the ruling party. So her father was the Justicus, and he and several of his cohort decided to attempt to rebel against the rest of the Illuminati, and they were captured and executed. So this is not a big reveal. This happened before the book started, and she is reflecting on it at the very beginning of the story. So when that happened, or shortly afterwards, her mother and her younger brother were captured, and they are in prison, and she is on the run. So she took off. She was able to elude those who would have killed, possibly tortured and killed her, and she was taken in by someone who I won't tell you, and her life took a totally different trajectory. So in this world, there is an opposing force, and that is what is called the Red Church. And the Red Church is comprised of those people who are faithful to the Mother of the Night, Naya, and Naya is the estranged wife of the Lord of Light. So the Illuminati worship the Lord of Light, and those who are part of the Red Church worship his estranged wife, Naya. And she's also known as Our Lady of the Blessed Murder. So there's a little bit of play off of Roman Catholicism there, obviously darker. And what Mia wants most is to be part of the Red Church. So she wants to grow up to be one of their assassins. So those are called blades in this world. And the blades go out and they rid the nation of those whom the Red Church views as a problem. Well, of course, Mia has her own agenda. She wants to get rid of those who executed her father, and those individuals are so high up in the Illuminati that they are virtually untouchable, and in order to get close to them, she believes that what she needs most is the kind of training and skill that she would learn as one of the Red Church assassins. So her entire objective is to make it across this wasteland of nightmarish creatures and somehow find this church, which is shrouded in secrecy, and then be accepted into their program as one of the acolytes training to be an assassin. So, all that to say, of course, this is about Mia's experience on that journey and what she learns. So what is the story really about? So the story on the surface deals very much, of course, with the Senate's actions against her father and her desire for revenge. So there's definitely a strong theme of revenge and vengeance in this book. And a lot of the other young people who are at this, Red Church training facility are looking for vengeance in one way or another. And that is the kind of theme we would expect from horror. And because we've got this horror theme that's consistent with horror, and we have this fantasy landscape, that is why this book is often categorized as dark fantasy, which is a mixture of horror and fantasy. However, could we also call it Gothic? So there is a secondary theme in this book, and Kristoff handles it brilliantly, and it is a theme that centers around the idea of fear. Not fear just in and of itself, but the advantages of fear, which is an extremely unique idea. And he uses a very unlikely character, and that is what is called a not cat. So, stay with me. So, when Mia was on the run from her father's executioners who wanted to catch her and kill her, she acquired, just by virtue of her fear, she acquired this cat that is like part demon, part shadow. So, it's not a real cat, it's actually the shadow of a cat, and this cat is always hungry. So it drinks her fear. Everywhere she goes, the cat drinks whatever would frighten her. It drinks her nightmares, it drinks everything. And you get this sense of her from start to finish. Mia comes across as just this fearless heroine, so much so that she comes across as foolhardy even. She's portrayed as having almost zero respect for anyone. So she is very sarcastic, very witty, she says a lot of things that would be very unwise to say, and she has a lot of narrow misses because of these things that she says and the things that she does. And some of them not so narrow. There are some things that happen to her very overtly because of her fearlessness. So I won't give anything away, but as you read the book, pay attention to the times when the not cat, she calls him Mr. Kindly, of all things, it's kind of a funny name. Pay attention to when the not cat is not with her. So there is a time when he is away from her briefly. There are a couple times when she loans the not cat to someone else because of a particularly fearful situation that she thinks she can handle better than perhaps another person can. And watch what comes of those circumstances. Like, what does she learn? What does she discover? What is she able to understand because the not cat is not with her? And I think that is the most telling, because it really elucidates this idea that fear gives us more of a clarity and more of an understanding. And by facing the fears, we're able to see yesterday, so her history. She's blinded to a lot of her history because she has repressed it. So fear gives us an ability to understand both yesterday and today more effectively, in such a way that we are able to come to wiser and better conclusions and to have a greater understanding of the world around us. And that theme, you could argue that theme borders on a Gothic theme. That is a very irrational theme. It is dealing very heavily with something very psychological, the notion that fear can play this kind of role in our lives. So I would almost categorize this book as a cross between Gothic horror and dark fantasy. Of course, it's easier to just call it dark fantasy for the mass market, but it really is somewhere in the middle. And Kristoff has an ending that is very satisfying and yet very, very surprising as well. I don't think anyone would guess how he brings that one around, but if you do, let me know. So if you like it, let me know in the comments, and let us all know what you thought of the theme, or what you thought of Mia and the characters and the overall story itself. So that's it for today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. That way you'll be notified every time I release videos. I post a new video every Friday. So until next time, stay undead, my friends.